Howdy, y'all, and welcome to another episode of the Stay Creative Podcast, a show dedicated to highlighting talented artists and letting them share with us tips for staying creative in our own lives. The show is recorded live weekly at the Indie Music Feedback Discord server, and to best serve time and clarity, some content is cut for the recorded and released version. If you want to get in on the conversation, come over to the Discord server anytime. It's an active community for artists to share, collaborate, and just enhance their own sounds. This week we're talking to a UK rock band called Into the Red. Specifically, we're talking to the lead singer-songwriter named Logan. He will share with us some history of the band, his own personal journey through art and music, and a lot of the details of the songs that you can listen to on their Spotify and places like that. So stick around, it's going to be a good talk. I do like to start these conversations, these interviews, with a little bit more about the artist behind the art. Since you are one of multiple members of your band, if you'd like to take a moment to introduce yourself and maybe tell us what you do in the band, and also introduce the band. You can kind of tell us the names and the roles of the other guys in your band too.
Well, it's pretty funny actually. Introducing the band is always something that I use to make a joke. But I'll save that. I'll be serious at first. So my name's Logan. For those of you that don't already know, I'm the singer and I play guitar. And Callum, who's in the chat with us, although he's been muted because he sounded, as you put, like T-Pain had a drink spilled on him. He plays bass, and Callum's mostly in charge of our social media presence and how we market ourselves, and he books all the shows. I'm sort of more in charge of the creative stuff, so the what kind of music we play, making sure that everybody knows the songs, and I write a lot of the material as well. Not all of it. There is a collaborative element for sure. Mm-hmm. So Callum plays bass, and then who's not present today, presumably because he's working. Actually, he's had to go back to work. But our other guitar player is Joshua, although he goes by Dougie, and our drummer is Ash. And normally when I introduce the band, I'll make a joke. So the last gig we played was in a coffee shop, which had sort of been kitted out for like a gig venue just for that one evening. We raised around £400 for Cancer Research UK, which is a charity where we are. As a product of that, we had 4 bands on, well, 4 acts. We had 3 bands, 1 solo artist, and it was a really amazing night. But when we go on stage, I'm like, "Hi, we're Simply Bread."
Nice.
But like, that's the sort of thing I'd normally say. Just a quick funny anecdote. The first time I introduced all the members of the group at a show, we were playing at a venue called the Rocking Chair here in Sheffield, which isn't actually a venue anymore. It's been closed down and reopened a few times. But I said, this is Josh on guitar, this is Callum on bass, and that's the drummer. And I didn't realize that his mother was in the audience, and I just hear this loud, shrill voice from the back of the room going, "His name's Ashley!" And that was all I needed to know to not do that again. Yeah. Ash also has a solo project. So if any of you are interested, he goes by Ashley Martindale Music, and he does music. He plays guitar and he sings as well as plays the drums, and he's been experimenting a lot with synthesizers and stuff. So he has his own solo project that you can check out.
Yeah, that's excellent. I personally, I think, I don't know that I can speak for everybody. I like when I get additional suggestions from these conversations of books and other bands and other, you know, artists and things. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, he's good. Like, he makes us all look bad. So we don't normally like to promote it because we're too worried that he'll get more famous than we are as a group. But
that's a friendship destroyer for sure. I've seen it happen. I think it's cool too that your band functions well because you each have like a passion that you use to promote the entire band, but also you kind of stay out of each other's way a little bit. There's like an understanding. Yeah.
I mean, in my case, that's being loud and obnoxious and wailing over power chords. In Callum's case, that's social media. In Josh's case, it's doing what I say, and then in Ashley's case, it's hitting things. So we got our thing. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Kind of moving on from introducing your role in the band, I'd like to know a little more about your own personal background. Where'd you grow up?
So I was born in South Wales in a town called Pontyberem, which is near Llanelli. I was born there, and my parents grew up in. I mean, you're American, obviously, so I'm not sure how much this means, but my parents were raising me and my brothers in Thatcher's Britain, which was really hard on poor people. And my parents were basically working with one income, and it was better for them to move into England. So I'm in the north of England at the minute in Sheffield. The whole band is, obviously. And I've been here most of my life. But I have a lot of nostalgia for Southwest Wales, where I was born, but I grew up in Sheffield. I've lived here for the majority of my life, and I think, you know, part of the reason I like that so much is because of the music scene. I was going to be an actor. I trained to be an actor for about 11 years. I've actually got a degree in performing arts before I went back to study music. You know, no offense to any actors in the chat, if there are any by chance, but actors are like. So I fell out with that. I had a couple of jobs that I didn't like, and then I got made redundant from a job that I did like. And so I went back to university, and then sort of in the background of all of this, I was always really interested in creating music and performing. And that's sort of been going on in the background, and it's just become more and more towards the forefront as time's gone on, as I've had more energy and more interest in, you know, being a part of it. So the Into the Red, as it stands, has been a thing for like 7 years. It's really in the last sort of 3 or 4 years that it's become. I don't know what the right way to phrase this is, but like the beast that it is now is largely over the last couple of years, as we've all sort of thought, like, let's take this more seriously and let's, you know, connect with people in more ways than just playing. You know, just playing shows occasionally. Let's just be more consistent and release music and have a social media presence. And again, that's largely the responsibility of Callum that's made that possible. So yeah, I don't know if that's as exciting an answer as you were hoping for, but that's
no,
that's
yeah. I every answer is the right answer around here, man. I appreciate knowing some of that background. I like to, in this who are you portion of the conversation, cover a little bit more of your non-music hobbies as well. What's something else you're into?
That is a very big question, so I hope you've got a lot of time. But just me personally, my favorite thing to do that's not to do with music, play computer games. So I'm not somebody that subscribes to one particular side of the console war or like PC master race. So I have a PlayStation and I play games on my PC, but I particularly like playing computer games when I'm not working with music and stuff. I think my favorites tend to be the ones that I feel like they couldn't work if they weren't a video game, like when they use the medium of video games kind of to their strengths. So you know, those games are my favorite. I think lately, like I'm a huge fan of like Dark Souls. For instance, I'm a big fan of the Dark Souls trilogy. I really like horror-themed games specifically. So Dark Souls, despite the fact that it's a role-playing game, has a lot of horror-themed stuff in it. There's a lot of existential and cosmic dread within that franchise. Obviously, because I like Dark Souls, I mean, it means I have to like Bloodborne and Sekiro as well, which I really like. And role-playing games like that as well. But it kind of crossover with my next favorite hobby is superheroes. So I really like the Batman games and the Spider-Man game that came out a couple of years ago. I'm a really big fan of that. And I collect comic books. I love to read and collect comic books when I'm not playing video games as well.
I feel like a lot of times the enjoyment of comic books and video games and sci-fi and things like that predate the time when you started playing music. But I want to know, like, when did you start playing music?
I was probably a little older than some people. I mean, I was 11 years old when I first started to learn to play the cello, and that was my mother found me a cellist to teach me to play because I'm a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the spin-off show Angel, and the theme song for that show, for Angel, has a banging cello melody in it. And I was like, I want to learn how to play that. And that was like my first thing of like, it would be really cool to play that instrument, to play this specific thing. So even though what I was listening to when I was 11 years old was guitar music, so my dad's favorites, we're talking like AC/DC, Thin Lizzy, Spirit, Blue Oyster Cult, you know, that was the guitar music that my dad was listening to, but I was still really impressed with this like opening theme for Angel. So that was, I learned to play the cello. So I was playing the cello for a little while. Then I played bass. I think I first picked up bass when I was 13, and then I played bass in a couple of bands, some with Callum, because Callum plays guitar as well. Callum played guitar in a couple of bands. Invariably, they were all terrible. But eventually, it was like those bands sort of dissolved, and Callum went to another city to study. And you know, this idea of being a musician and stuff was like, well, I can't just be a solo bassist. So I picked up a guitar. I asked for a guitar for my 14th birthday, and my mother bought me I mean, it was inexpensive. I didn't have a huge budget, so can't complain on my mother's part at all. I really appreciate the gift, but this guitar was terrible. But that was it, and I learned to play Green Day and Metallica songs on it.
As far as guitar players go, I feel like you have to learn like a Green Day and a Metallica riff, and that
passage, isn't it?
Yeah, Smoke on the Water. You've got to learn Smoke on the Water if you're a bassist. So
I'm pretty sure I can play Smoke on the Water, but I'm still not convinced I'm playing it right.
Yeah. Yeah. You've already kind of touched on some of your early influences with, you know, the Angel theme song kind of awakening that early stirring to learn how to play stuff, and your dad's like guitar influences and rock. Of course, Green Day and Metallica have made an appearance. What else would you say were some of your like earliest influences?
When I picked up the guitar, I sort of realized that music was like kind of, that was going to define a huge part of my personality. So there was a lot of music at that time. But when I was a teenager, when I was first learning to play, it was actually bands like Pendulum and Queens of the Stone Age that I was listening to. Like, they were like the contemporary bands that I was listening to. You know, they were relevant when I was learning to play. Like, these weren't just bands from a bygone era that were really good back in the day. And when I was learning to play, it was Queens of the Stone Age. So their latest album at that time was Era Vulgaris. And that album was mind-blowing. Like, I don't even think it's my favorite album by that band, but just at the time, I'd heard nothing like it. And then Pendulum, even though a lot of their music was synthesizers focused, I would still learn to play the synthesizer parts like on the guitar. So like, I can play all of the synthesizer parts to just about every Pendulum song on the guitar because they're just so catchy. Like, they get stuck in your head. And so like a lot of my relationship with melody and about writing melody for guitar is actually sort of from Pendulum and their way of writing synthesizer melodies that would often be doubled up on the guitar. Yeah, as well, the White Stripes, which is a bit different, a bit of a departure from what I've already mentioned, but their sort of do-it-yourself garage rock aesthetic. I think Jack White and his work with that band, and also with the Raconteurs and his solo stuff, and even the Dead Weather, really formative for me in terms of like what you can get away with the guitar doing.
So would you say, for the most part, you're still getting a lot of inspiration from your early inspiration? I know you mentioned earlier a pretty active local scene, so maybe some of those guys have rubbed off on you some.
Yeah, I think a big part of my influence, to be fair, is on like my friends and stuff sort of insisting that I listen to particular music whether I want to or not. Like, because this music is just so good and you have to listen to it. So that is a big way that I discover lots of new music, or at least I did. Nowadays, I'll take any recommendation from anybody seriously, unless it's from Callum. But like, because I part of the fun of listening to music is listening to something for the first time and reminiscing about what it was like when you listened to it for the first time. But for the past couple of years, I have been really, really into hip hop. And that has had more of an influence on my songwriting than I think you'd realize just listening to it, because I think that a lot of the big names in hip hop, like my personal favorite, we're talking Kendrick Lamar. I'm also a big fan of Kanye West, and his collaborative album with Kid Cudi, Kids See Ghosts, was just amazing. Callum will probably hit me if I don't mention Death Grips. And you know, I'm a fan of Death Grips as well. Like this is where music being sort of aggressive and experimental is becoming kind of dangerous again, like in a way that punk rock or industrial rock was sort of in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. So that's kind of more recently I've been really inspired by hip hop. I think To Pimp a Butterfly, Kendrick Lamar, is one of the best albums ever. I think it's probably the best hip hop album ever recorded. I just think it's phenomenal. Aside from that, I'm a really big fan of, at the minute, I discovered kind of, over the last couple of years, there's been quite a lot of shoegazing alternative rock bands that were really big in the 90s that have just sort of had a resurgence of popularity, and I'm not really sure why, but I'm glad, because it's brought to my attention bands like Slowdive, My Bloody Valentine, Ride, Spaceman 3, and that's sort of the use of the guitar as a textural device rather than just a melodic or harmonic device. The way you can use the guitar to kind of create these soundscapes is really exciting to me as well. And I've got a Jazzmaster now, which means that using that guitar to sort of bend notes slightly out of tune with each other and stuff. And as well, bands like American Football, their 3 LPs are just, they're all so different and they're all so good. But what they're really good at doing is having 2 guitar parts playing something really different that sound like one guitar part when you put them together. And that's something that I've definitely thought of a lot. You know, so again, like you were saying about, you know, I listened to Paramore a lot less when I was younger, but a lot more now. I think that's the case with a lot of emo music. I couldn't really escape it as a teenager, but I'm more interested in it now because it's not as cool, I guess. But you know, the sort of the melancholy in that, and the interesting use of harmony, and the way that sort of the technical ability on the guitar comes across as so unpretentious, because it feels really essential that you have that twinkly riff or that guitar tapping, because it just sounds so beautiful. That's something that's really inspired me a lot. Lo-fi hip hop as well, dream pop. So we're talking bands like Beach House and M83 and Mild Orange. Like, that's a big thing, like the textural side of it, because I think all of the guitar innovation was done sort of 20 years before I was born, and now we've got all this textural innovation that's happened that I just had no idea about. That's been really, really interesting. I'm not saying that there's not original and inventive guitar players now, because of course there are. Yeah. But you know, the innovation is in a different respect now. It's not melodic or harmonic in the same respect. It's sort of textural.
Another thing I wanted to get into about just kind of your musical background and maybe your musical aspirations is, and it's funny because we already kind of talked some about your fandom of sci-fi and comics and video games and stuff, but the question I had pre-planned was, if you could play a show in any fictional setting, such as from a film or a novel, what setting would you choose and why?
I don't know, I'd maybe play the concert hall at the end of Whiplash, because Into the Red would be so far removed from what the crowd is expecting. And the fact that we would be so far removed from what they were expecting, and the judges wouldn't know how to judge us, because we don't really play jazz. Like, I'm influenced a lot by jazz, but you wouldn't call our music jazz at all. But that would probably cause enough of a stir for people to talk about it. It would probably be either that, or, you know, the venue at the end of School of Rock.
Yes.
Because how on earth did the promoter for that venue get 2,500 people to go to a show played by local kids and like local bands on a weekday morning? So that would be the kind of exposure I would want, is fans who are that committed to going to that kind of show.
Yeah, those are. It's funny how rooted in reality those answers actually are. Like, I was expecting like the Starship Enterprise, some absolutely disconnected from reality type answer. But yeah, those are both good ones. And you really would at both places, you would generate a bizarre kind of buzz because first off, the people who showed up for that midday battle of the bands in wherever School of Rock is, like they would probably latch on pretty hard to you guys' high energy jams compared to the other stuff that they showed on. Yeah.
I appreciate you saying. Like, I'm a fan of the film School of Rock anyway, but that, like, if I'm just some local band that doesn't already have a following and the promoter can get that many people in, I want to be playing that venue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind playing a show on the Starship Enterprise, but I also wouldn't have minded being the band, at the end of Return of the Jedi when the Ewoks and everybody is celebrating on the forest moon of Endor. I'd probably play that one as well.
Playing on the Stormtrooper helmets, like
yeah. I mean, Ash, our drummer, when we first started jamming, he had like a biscuit tin that was just full of like nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
And he would hit that for a snare, and then he'd have like Tupperware that he'd use as like a kick and hats and everything. So he's got no issues playing on Stormtrooper bucket hats. Like we would definitely play that for sure.
Yeah, that's excellent. Tell me what it is you make in your own words. I've personally found that when I hear an artist talk about their own work, I get to take just a little bit of their passion towards their art for myself, and it usually changes the way I interact with their work. So I want to give you an opportunity to tell me and the people listening now and the people who may be listening to this sometime in the future, what is it that you make?
Wow, okay. Whenever I get asked this, I feel like I want to answer it a different way, but I'm going to do my best to be consistent with what I've normally said. And we call it space rock. And we call it space rock not because all of our songs are specifically about space or space travel or about stars and planets and everything like that, which, some of the songs, I mean, maybe even most of them, to be fair, are. But it's also just the textural quality of the expanse and of the existential experience of nothingness and being an insignificant part of such a vast and unending and infinite universe is something that inspires every aspect of our music, not just the words, but also the musical element as well. So that's why we call it space rock, and that's why we lean into the whole space thing. Like, you can see Callum's avatar is our mascot.
Yeah, he's got a name. What's the name?
Quinn the cosmonaut.
Yeah.
Who you can follow on Instagram at Quinn_the_cosmonaut if you want to find out more about Quinn's adventures. But Quinn is obviously the kind of the embodiment of what we think we are. We're not just observing, we're exploring, and we're trying to experience something new with our own experience of art. So there's none of our songs that isn't about something that's sort of greater than myself as an individual. Like, I'm always trying to write about human experience and about the experience of feeling insignificant and the feeling of existential dread and that feeling of cosmic awe, and I think that stems a lot from my experience of science fiction. Like, a lot of science fiction is sort of rooted in the idea that there is so much out there that we don't know about. And so I think it's my way of trying to come to terms with my own feelings of insignificance with the band as well, and with the music that we play is kind of my way of addressing that, and also experiences that I not have only have had but could have, and that maybe fictional characters that I relate to have had as well. So our music, I think, to kind of summarize, is it's not just describing, it's reaching. I'm trying to call out to something for an answer. And whether there's an answer or not, the experience of reaching out is still worth it for its own sake. I don't know if Callum's put anything that he wants to add, because obviously Callum does our marketing and stuff as well. Mm-hmm. But that's just like, from my perspective, that's the kind of thing I'm mostly inspired by.
I think that's excellent, because it there is a assumed significance to the individual, but then as you begin to explore and examine that system closer, you find that it is made up of an infinite number of smaller, quote unquote, insignificant parts that give it life.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And the idea as well, there's this running theme, I think, throughout human psychology and philosophy in general, is that we all kind of feel like we're the hero of a story that kind of revolves around us. And not to say that we all think we're the most important person in the world or anything, but our own experience is obviously, we're way more in touch with that than the experience of others. You know, and that experience of kind of realizing as you grow up that other people exist and have feelings and have experiences that are just totally different to yours, and even trying to understand or even sympathize or empathize with those experiences is a big part of growing up, and a big part of, you know, the music that we make.
Yeah, and you touched on that there's this value to asking the question, despite maybe the absence of an answer. And I feel like that is something that almost comes back thematically throughout your tracks and your lyrics, in a way that and this is kind of an abstract comparison, but you mentioned jazz, and in jazz, how a solo is often like 4 notes played differently over and over again until suddenly they're beautiful, as opposed to corrosive, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you keep revisiting this idea until you come back with some sort of resolve on it, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely think that's a really good way of putting it. I really like how you put that. There's value in asking the question, even if there's no answer. You know, I think that's one of the reasons everybody likes true crime documentaries about crimes that never got solved. Like, there's value in being asked the question and then asking the question to yourself and sort of coming up with your own interpretation and your own answer that satisfies you as an individual, even if in the grandest scheme of things you can't be an authority on the truth of something like that, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I would like to get into some more of your specific tracks. I'd like to start just the portion actually with one of your newer demos, Contraband. Not only is it quite an exciting jam from start to finish with that huge, like, almost power pop synthy opening type thing going on, and then it jumps really gracefully but dynamically through different parts, never getting too familiar, never becoming mundane or too comfortable. Like, it stays pretty exciting. I'd like to talk more about writing that song.
So I think the origin, that synthy riff you describe at the beginning, which is about 4 synthesizers and then about another 4 guitars layered on top of each other.
Nice.
That was the first idea that I had, and I tried about 1 million different sort of rhythmic ideas and harmonic ideas to go under it, and I eventually settled on the one that I did, just sort of the simple power pop thing, basically because I wanted people to pay more attention to the words, I think, than the music. Like, the music wasn't, I wouldn't call it secondary, but I already had a lot of the lyrics written down before I started writing the music, which is unusual for me. So I thought, all right, if I've written it this way, let's put that kind of at the forefront. So the idea for the words is I got kind of infatuated with this idea of borrowed or stolen time. And so, you know, the words, I was kind of describing the idea of, you know, we can't, you know, no amount of hard work or money or anything like that could ever buy you a second of time. And so every second of time that we have is intrinsically valuable, because it's the one thing you kind of can't ever get back. You can't ever get a refund on your time. So, like, you know, people leaving comments in YouTube videos to songs they didn't like, saying, "Oh, that's 3 minutes of my life I'll never get back."
Yeah.
You know, and we have this interesting relationship with time. And I think the idea with Contraband was that a lot of the songs that I write, I get the ideas for them really late at night or really, really early in the morning, because I don't sleep great generally. I typically have chronic insomnia a lot of the time, and a lot of my greatest ideas kind of come at night when everyone else is asleep, or at least it feels like it, and I kind of have my own little world to myself. And I wanted to write a song about being in that world. And it isn't always a particularly pleasant place to be in, but it is always somewhere that I feel like I can sort of be myself in, and I can kind of express myself. And in that respect, I feel like it's a song about self-expression. It's about making the most of the time that you have, and also reflecting on the difficulty that you have had, and trying not to think of that as time misspent, but also time invested that you get growth out of as a result.
Yeah.
And the kind of the atypical structure, because obviously you have the intro, verse, chorus, and then it doesn't have a bridge or a chorus. It just goes into a whole new section for the end of the song. That was mainly just I didn't want to go out on half time, because the chorus goes to half time. I didn't want to go out on that. I wanted it to be more aggressive. And so the idea that I had was I was going to write some lines, and then I was going to repeat it over and over again. But the song wound up being about 6 minutes long when I repeated it 4 times. So I limited that down to twice.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how we got that final verse. But the idea of every second being contraband is that every second it belongs to you, but there is maybe, for a lot of people, somebody who wants that for themselves. And so you have to keep it close, because that time will, someone else wants it. Like even in the way we work, like people who work full-time jobs, like, you're essentially selling your time to somebody. And that's the way the world kind of works at the minute. And, I think I'm not saying that people just shouldn't work or anything. But like at the same time, it's like your time is intrinsically valuable, and it's obviously valuable to someone else because they're willing to buy it off you.
I think that is a cool idea, and it's a really cool, partially sci-fi way to approach the idea. I like that about your music. It all feels like a concept album masking reality in a neat way.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about time as a commodity, I mean, even in a film like 12 Monkeys, you've got like time is money. So like if you think of time as a commodity, like it's a commodity that can't be traded, like you only have a limited amount, but you can't give it to someone else and you can't get any off anybody else. So all you can do is spend it, and you have to spend it well. And obviously what you think spending your time well is down to the individual, and that's really important. And I think I don't necessarily suggest what I think spending time as an individual is important as in that particular song. But the idea of spending time well is something that really inspired the words.
I actually want to get more into specifics of some of your songwriting. I'd like to talk first, and I'm glad we're getting to this portion now, about the track Bonfire.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's the song that has been stuck in my head the hardest in my time spent just, going over your music. The opening line, both melodically and lyrically, are pleasant, that they're sticky, like a good catchy hook right off the bat, but also they're just kind of mysterious in a way that makes me want to get into the story of the track as quickly as possible. I love that about it. And now that we've talked about your fanship of Dark Souls, I have to ask if the song is in any way referencing Dark Souls.
If I couldn't die, would you see straight through the lie? Our ages guards my husk like a dying chrysalis. I'll wander in my circle and I'll think of nothing else. The time has come to let this curse take me home. Light a fire.
It is.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah, no, it is. So the idea for that song came from Dark Souls 2. And Dark Souls 2 is thematically, I think, the richest story. And one of the fascinating things about Dark Souls is that you can completely ignore the story in those games if you want to. One of the reasons I think that people like them so much is because you get out of it what you put into it. So if you want to get a good story out of it, you can explore the world and talk to all the NPCs and get a story, and not just one story, but you can get lots of stories. And one of the stories that really spoke to me in Dark Souls 2 was the story of King Vendrick. And King Vendrick, within the lore of Dark Souls 2, for everybody listening who maybe hasn't played it, he was a king of the kingdom that the game is set in. And his queen, his wife, convinced him to invade a nearby nation of giants. They went to war with the giants. It's not clear who won, but nobody really won. And King Vendrick has been cursed forever, and he will never die. and he will instead wander around his throne room, being guarded by his bodyguard, the royal bodyguard, whose name I can't remember. Volstat, that's it. And he will protect this lifeless husk of King Vendrick until he himself is killed, because that's just sort of what he swore to do. So this idea of this empty shell that represents everything that exists within the world kind of spoke to me, and I sort of thought about it a lot more, and I realized that Dark Souls is it was my brother that sort of turned me onto this idea, but the whole of the story of Dark Souls is kind of an allegory for the inevitable heat death of the universe. And particularly in Dark Souls 2, the idea with the ending of Dark Souls 2 is that you get a choice, and the choice is essentially to take King Vendrick's place or to ignore the kingdom altogether and let it rot. But if you take King Vendrick's place, the kingdom will eventually be succeeded by another hero who will take your place, and then eventually that hero will have to make the same decision, and someone inevitably will make the decision to let the kingdom rot and turn to darkness. And so if you apply that to stars in the universe, there is only so much fuel in the universe, and so eventually the stars and all our suns, they will all have to die, and the universe will be left as a cold, dead, and lifeless place. And knowing that, what is the point in anything? That's what Bonfire is about. I'm asking that question.
Yeah. When it started up the first time, I thought, okay, there's something happening here that I am going to understand. Before I stop listening to this song, I'm going to understand this. And by maybe the third listen, I was like, I looked at my wife and I was like, I think this song's about Dark Souls. I was like, but I kind of think everything's about Dark Souls, so maybe I should keep that secret, But now
it is kind of about Dark Souls.
Yeah,
you're right about that.
I wanted to ask more about where do you typically get inspiration? Obviously, this one is a game and an aspect of a story that you already enjoyed. You brought it into your musical practice, but would you say every single song is a retelling of something you've enjoyed, or do you take inspiration from other places as well?
I think I kind of take inspiration from everywhere. So it depends. Like, I've been writing a lot of songs about nature recently and about kind of our relationship with nature. But there's certainly been more than one time when I've been inspired by some kind of media. So like a game or a book or a film or something like that. But a lot of the time I sort of, I'll literally like leap out of bed because I could hear an idea in my head. Like, I need to kind of get this recorded in case I forget it, and I just sort of kind of go from there. And a lot of the times I'll write 5 or 6 songs, and none of them are really any good, but I'll take ideas from each of them and turn them into sort of one new song, and do that. Like I was saying before, like I'm really inspired by this feeling of insignificance as an individual, and the idea of connectedness being this really powerful thing. And I think that a lot of the time when I'm writing, I don't really realize what I'm writing about until the words are kind of finished. It kind of comes out like a stream of consciousness. So I think it's like a lot of my songs are like a little time capsule for what I was writing about at the time. And then as more ideas get involved from other members of the band, or I sort of add to and take away from certain ideas as we go along. Like, I mean, we've got a track called Spellbound. Like, that song is literally about a separation from nature, like feeling separate to it, like feeling like I can observe it, but I can't sort of be a part of it. And then on the other hand, I've got we play some songs like Ghosts in the Metro, which is another one that was inspired by a video game, but in a very different way. But at the same time, it's those sort of existential themes that I really connect to. So if I watch a film, or I read a book, or I play a computer game, or I have a conversation that sort of exposes me to a new philosophical or existential idea, chances are I'm going to at least try and write a song about it, because in those initial moments after I hear about that idea, that's when I'm going to be most inspired by it.
Just kind of taking stimulus in and using your own reaction to it to create a new thing based on the way it made you feel. That's cool.
Yeah, I like that, actually. It's my reaction to it that I'm writing
Yeah.
about. Like that's the perspective I've got. It's not action. It's like reaction.
Yeah, I like that. And actually, you brought up the next song I really wanted to talk about, "Ghosts in the Metro." Before we even get into my question, is it about the Metro games?
Yeah, it is. Not necessarily directly, but it was again inspired by them. A little bit more direct than Bonfire, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah.
In the first game in that trilogy, Metro 2033, the central character Artyom has a friend called Khan, and Khan explains that when people die in the Metro, they have nowhere to go because the nuclear war that decimated the surface didn't just destroy the Earth, it destroyed heaven and hell and purgatory, which means that the souls of the dead have nowhere else to go. And so I wrote a song from the perspective of one of those ghosts.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's the story behind that one. I think the fact that it kind of turned out to be sort of a power pop banger was kind of my mistake. Because, it's this really big philosophical idea like, oh, what if there is no heaven and hell and there is no afterlife and our legacy is left behind on the earth? And, that was obviously a big part of the inspiration, but also it fell together really nicely. Like, I just want to write a song that people are going to kind of bop to. And we normally close our sets with it for that exact reason.
Yeah, I feel like even without knowing that, I felt like the lyrics were again giving me that feeling of listening in on a story that's already kind of in progress. And it was enjoyable for what it was, but it left me wanting to be able to ask these questions. And yes, an absolutely great bass line. I see Callum has commented.
Yeah, no, he that bass line. That was the last thing I wrote for it because I was absolutely tearing my hair out for a verse. That I eventually sort of went, all right, you know what? I'm going to write a groovy bass line. And I've just been listening to Groove is in the Heart.
Yeah.
And that song has just got an absolutely pucker bass line. And I just sort of, right, I want something like Groove is in the Heart. And I couldn't get it to sound right on my bass guitar. So I punched it in. I used MIDI to write that bass line. And then I played it properly afterwards. And it was like, I've got it. That's what it's going to be. And then Callum was like, oof, that bass line.
Well, that's cool. That's actually, it kind of touches on something I wanted to ask about this track, because it feels like a departure from your other music in a way. It almost has like a math rock opening in a kind of heavy or intense way that some of your songs don't quite do. A lot of your songs sounds like your band Into the Red, and it's enjoyable. But this one, as soon as it starts up, it's like, oh, my Spotify has changed artist on me again. For a brief moment. Yeah, it's cool. So
you've forgotten to renew your subscription because it's starting playing random stuff again.
Yeah. But you've already kind of touched on, you wrote that bass line as well as the lyrics and the guitar part. So being a 4-piece band, do you guys ever have creative conflict first off, but also cooperation? Or is it all just what you write, the rest of the band learns, and
well, there's been more than a few occasions where I've written something that I'm really, really happy with. A song that I'm really proud of. It's my best work. And then Ash has sort of come to me and said, this is shit. What on earth are you thinking? And the thing is that Ash is always right about that sort of thing. So no, I do not claim to have all the creative control. I think to say that I have most of it would maybe be fair. But I think that the relationship that I have with the other musicians is that even if they don't write any melodies or any chord sequences for the songs, their input is still really important. Callum and I will have lots of conversations about what the song is going to sound like. Even if the writing process is, mostly done in my room and stuff. So yeah, there is some creative conflict. Yeah, so there's a lot of back and forth. Like I don't mean to be like a dictator. I probably come across like one, to be fair. But I don't mean to be one. I think that I'm more interested in making music that everyone's happy to play. So if we ever play any music that gets as far as being released, it has been rigorously and thoroughly observed and critiqued by everyone else in the band, rewritten either by me or by other members of the band, and you know, that's like the process. So it's not like I write a song and then it's done. You know, I'll write a song and then it gets rewritten and contributed to by other members of the band. Because if it was just me writing songs and then it's done, it's not a band anymore, is it? It's just, you know, the Logan MacDonald solo project, and that's not what this is. You know, we're a collective, and I write music for the members of the band. I don't write for the instruments. I write for the people who are going to be playing them. So that has a huge impact as well.
Well, I want to move into one of my favorite portions of the conversation typically, and that is more about the why. Why do you create? Why do you make art? Why do you spend time collaborating with guys when you probably could just write your own songs and be the Logan MacDonald project? You know, like, what is it that keeps you creating in this format? And even when I'm positive as an artist, you've had frustrating times that you thought about maybe not doing it anymore. What is it that keeps you coming back?
That's a really good question. I think the band format is better generally because it affords me just more flexibility. And all of my favorite artists, they're not solo artists. They're in bands. They collaborate. Even if there's like, you know, what you call like a principal songwriter in those bands, you know, someone who does like most of the writing, there's always a collaborative element to it. And it keeps me level. Like, if I didn't have anybody like Ash telling me that, Logan, this is dog shit, like, if I didn't have anybody saying that, I would have no way of knowing if I was growing and if I was getting better as an individual musician. And I think that all four of us have exactly that same relationship with the music. Like, we don't just want to repeat ourselves. We all want to be doing something exciting and interesting, and that other people are going to find exciting and interesting too. And the most exciting and interesting content and music that we make is with the support of each other. And, you know, even if it's just little things like Josh, you know, Dougie saying something like, you know what would sound really good is if I sang a harmony here, like over, you know, sang a harmony over this quiet bit. And, you know, that just added so much to the track. Like, you know, and ideas like when Ash is sort of like, oh yeah, you know, I was thinking that maybe this drum part could be a little different because of this, that, and the other reason. You know, it feels too consistent. We need to switch it up at this point and stuff. And, you know, that's kind of like, yeah, great. And then, you know, Callum's sort of saying things like, let's turn it all up to maximum and turn our fuzz pedals on and just be really loud and obnoxious. Like, but that, like, joking aside, like, that's created some of our music. Like, that's been the foundation of some of our ideas. It's been in sort of that silliness and that playfulness.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, I think if I was just the Logan MacDonald band or the Logan MacDonald project, you know, if I was John Mayer, I'd not be grounded. I'd not be growing. I'd just be sort of, you know, I wouldn't be communicating and collaborating and growing as an individual. I'd just be stagnant. That's how I feel about it.
I feel like it's a critical thing for artists to share both with one another and also people who maybe haven't started their artistic journey yet, like what it is that they found valuable in their time, you know, in both their personal time and their communal time with, you know, surrounding their creative process. So I appreciate you sharing that.
It's not just within the band as well. It's sharing that process with other bands, because there's so much more to being in a band than just writing and playing music, like networking and releasing and collaborating with other groups. Like half the bands that we play with, again, Callum's largely responsible for this because he does all of our, I say all of, at least most of our networking, but I would go so far as to say all of it. Like, you know, to find these other bands that are really interesting and like thematically appropriate for the bill we're trying to put together, like that is also really important. So even if, you know, there's not, you know, even if I'm too busy writing songs to do that stuff, the rest of the band is doing something. You know, Callum's doing his social media stuff. Dougie's, you know, working on his guitar parts and sort of reworking the leads I write for him, and Ash is getting drunk or whatever. But like, you get my drift. Like that's, you know, all part of the process. It's not just playing. There's a lot more as well. But that's almost part of the, almost like the whole point. Like, it wouldn't be worth it if it wasn't for all this growth, artistic growth as an individual as well. Like, and the music scene locally is so important to us. You know, we just love playing with other bands. I mean, I didn't really get much of a chance to talk about the music video earlier because I rambled on about the song for so long. But like, even that idea was just a way of saying hi to our fans and stuff, other people that we collaborate with. Because it's like, no, we still exist. We've even worked really hard on this video that Logan has edited in not Windows Movie Maker, but something similar. You know, like, you get the drift.
Yeah, for sure. Last thing I really like to talk about, and you've already touched on some of this, but I want to know in a more personal way the content which you're referring to. You've said you've learned a lot from other bands and just kind of sharing within that community, and also, of course, being a 4-piece band, you guys have like a process. But I want to know more about your practice or what discipline you follow when it comes to create something. You said sometimes you hop out of bed and you make something. How do you get an idea you hopped out of bed with into a song that I have heard on Spotify?
Well, it always starts with a guitar. So, you know, I'll plug my guitar into my computer and just record it. And, you know, I keep everything, even the stuff that Ash says is dog shit. Like, I keep all of that stuff, you know, just in case there's an idea sort of worth dealing with later, you know, even if it's just sort of a bare idea. So, but generally speaking, it's guitar, and then it's sort of, you know, I'll use a drum machine to sort of program like a song's worth of loop around this idea. And, you know, sometimes I'll hear something, like I'll read something in a book, or someone will say something, or I'll say something sometimes and sort of think, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'll put that in a song. Like, you know, sometimes I'll say something that rhymes by mistake, and, you know, it can just be tiny little things like that. So for me, a lot of the time songs kind of come together really slowly. And sometimes they'll come together on, like, you know, top to bottom, like in a day, which I don't care what anybody says, like, that's really fast. You know, but it's not like a humble brag. It's like, at that point, I then need to refine it and make it good. But like, the core idea will be developed in that time, you know. Mm-hmm. But generally it's with guitar. Sometimes I'll send an idea, like I'll record a little video or a little audio thing of me saying, this is this idea, and then I'll like play the riff. And sometimes it's like, oh, here's this riff in like standard tuning, and here's this riff in like C tuning, like C standard tuning, like which one sounds better? Or like, I've been mucking around with this idea, like, what do you think of this? And so
you kind of try to communicate every step of the process to the rest of the group.
It depends on how personal that individual step is. I think not necessarily every step, and it definitely depends on the song. Like, we've got a song which we haven't released, isn't anywhere yet, so don't get excited. But this particular song that I've been working on, like, it went through a bunch of different revisions, and the verse and the chorus structure stayed the same, but there's an instrumental passage at the end that I kept wanting to change. And getting ideas for those changes was a process of talking to the band and about the other guys and saying like what they thought they would want to play as individuals over this bit, you know, over this bizarre sort of instrumental outro part. And it went through about 5 or 6 revisions before I was happy with it. You know, so maybe not necessarily every step, but like every step where I get stuck, that's where I open it up to everybody else. And even sometimes when I don't get stuck, I'll open it up to everybody else to just sort of say like, I don't know, I've been listening to a lot of Tame Impala. Does this sound too much? Let it happen. Like,
yeah.
You know, and I'll send that across and sort of see what people say to it and stuff. Because, you know, there is one song that we don't play quite as often anymore, that I hadn't realized that one of the riffs in it just sounded way too similar to like another song. So I had to rewrite that entire section because it was bordering on plagiarism kind of thing.
Wow,
I wouldn't notice that sort of thing if it weren't for my peers in the band. So I really, really appreciate and cherish, you know, having them around because, you know, like I said before, if I was doing all of this stuff by myself, I'd tear my hair out.
For sure. Well, I appreciate that answer. I feel like, again, you know, I've already mentioned that, you know, part of the point of this show is to share what you have learned in your journey with folks who maybe on their first song they've ever written, or maybe they've convinced themselves they can't. So I feel like knowing that, community, like having a group that you can come to when you're stuck, or maybe you're just, looking for the next idea. I think that's a really cool way to do it. So it's also a cool, almost microcosm of the description of a band.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I like that. If there's anything in particular you'd like to say that maybe I didn't give you space to communicate, or just whatever it is that you may want to take a moment to say before we end the call, I'd like to give you time to do so.
I don't know if Callum's got anything that he wants to add, but just in general, thanks to everybody who tuned in and stuck around. For anyone that hasn't actually listened to our music yet, we'd really, really love it if you did. Our demo tapes you can hear on our YouTube channel, and then our officially released, fully mixed and mastered music is on all our major streaming services. Obviously, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, there's tons of acoustic performances that I've done in my room, and little memes and stuff like that. So maybe find us. We're on Facebook and everything, and on Twitter and all that. So maybe find us on there and come say hi. And I'm happy to answer any more questions, or if anyone else had anything they wanted to say or ask to me or to Callum or anyone in the band. We try our best to kind of communicate with that. But I just, you specifically, I really want to thank you for taking the time to have us on as well. I've really enjoyed the whole experience, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been good. I'm grateful for your time, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. So good day, everybody. I don't know what time it is everywhere, but hey.
Yeah, peace.
See ya.
I really enjoyed the Into the Red music before my talk with Logan, and I think I'm only going to enjoy it more now that I know some of the details about what goes into creating this music and what visions and stories they are capturing and telling in this music. It's really exciting. I love that he shared his approach of kind of capturing his own reactions to things and using that to fuel his creative process, but also keeping his community as a steady sounding board so that he's always enhancing the sounds that his band will be making. It's not just a solo effort, it's not just a solo project, but it is a whole band coming together to make something awesome. I hope you take a moment to check out the show notes for their link. I will have it available. Also in the show notes, of course, there's a link to all of the essential things you may need regarding the show. There's a place to find all the other podcatchers we're available on. Recent blog post, one of the regulars over at IMF wrote about the show and about me. There are all of our wonderful sponsors. This show has no company sponsors, so every opportunity to have any sort of support externally goes to artists that we then are able to promote, and every single one are phenomenal. That I'm proud to be sponsored by such talented folks, and I hope you take a moment to just go through, click, listen to a track each, see which style of our different supporters you're into. It's a wide array and quite an enjoyable thing to get into. I am excited to share more time with you guys soon. Obviously next week we will be talking with the wonderfully talented Starcry, a guy who's actually from the same state as me, so that's interesting. Until then, stay courageous, stay curious, and stay creative. Enjoy this track from one of the show's sponsors, Lo-Fi Phone. You can find a link to the rest of his work in the link tree attached to the show notes for the Stay Creative podcast. Without sponsors, the show doesn't exist. Without audience, the show doesn't exist. And without artists willing to share their time with me and their art with me and with the rest of us, the show doesn't exist. So I'm extremely grateful. Enjoy.